Hi, welcome back to the Scent Advocate. I was going to make a video today about some of the other interesting fragrances I experienced through a recent sample haul from Lucky Scent, but I realized I hadn't done a follow-up video to the cost savings video I did a couple of weeks ago. And I'm really passionate about fragrance. I imagine if you're watching this video, you are too. Responsible spending, especially in these economic times, is really important. And I don't want to unintentionally support ideas around having to spend exorbitant amounts of money on these full bottle fragrance hauls. So I wanted instead to talk about some alternatives that do allow me to engage in my fragrance hobby and to grow in my fragrance experience at the same time and not break the bank. So my first video was about using samples in order to experience fragrance and ensure that you're only buying what you really love and what you've tested on yourself that really works out. So it's more of a solid commitment if you go to the extent of buying a full bottle. Before I go any further, I do want to make it clear that I'm not giving financial advice or advice of any kind in this video or any of my videos. These are just ideas that have worked for me that I thought might be good to share. If you too are not in a position to periodically buy, 10 bottles in a fragrance haul or any number of bottles in a fragrance haul. This is, an alternative that may be more practical and reasonable. I know these options, these ideas have worked well for me. And, if you gain any benefit by hearing how I do things, then that's a positive. But again, I'm not giving any kind of advice, not legal, investment, financial, medical, any kind of advice. So please take this in the spirit it's shared, which is just ideas that work for me. In addition to fragrance samples, another idea that I've been considering myself, but I haven't actually done yet, but I've definitely engaged in the process of researching it, is the secondary market. What do I mean by the secondary market? Well, these would be fragrances that are pre-loved, or to put it crudely, used, opened already, and perhaps it wasn't a fragrance that the current owner wanted to keep, or maybe they've got more than one bottle, or maybe their body chemistry changed and they don't like it, or maybe they really loved it when they bought it, but they don't find themselves reaching for it as much. Something that perhaps could have been avoided if they had implemented tip number 1, which is sample and try before you buy, but I won't get into that. But there are people out there who have fragrances in their collections that they're looking to sell. And most of the time, unless it's discontinued or in a special bottle or there are some unique circumstances, you could get these at a substantial discount from retail, even at a substantial discount from retail with a 10 or 20% coupon sometimes. It all depends, right? But you can find wonderful fragrances where they've only been sprayed a couple of times. They've, maybe 3 or 4 sprays, maybe worn it on 1 or 2 occasions, realized it wasn't for them. Maybe they wore it a few more times than that, and the bottle is 3/4 full or 2/3 full, whatever the case is. The price is reflective of the amount of use of the fragrance or how much is left in the bottle. At least if it's priced properly, it should be. Unless, of course, like I said, there's something unique about the bottle or the fragrance is maybe discontinued or something like that. So the point is, you can often get these at a fantastic discount. But as we all know, there is risk in buying from a stranger online, even in person. There is much more comfort we get, right, from buying from a retailer where we have recourse if there's something wrong with the bottle or the fragrance somehow went rancid or whatever. And that kind of recourse usually doesn't exist when dealing with, consumer to consumer transactions over the secondary market. So how do you avoid these risks, right? How do you know that regardless of how much money you're saving, it's still your money? And if you're paying for a fragrance, you expect that amount of fragrance that you're paying for to be good. You don't want it to be rancid. You don't want the bottle to be leaking. You don't want there to be any unknowns, right? Whatever is described in the description of the fragrance that you're buying should be what you're getting. And it is based on that description that you agreed to pay the price. So how can you avoid there being a disconnect? Well, a couple of things. First, think about the seller. Very often on secondary market websites, so what goes on person to person is going to be different. I'm not going to cover that here. But on a website, there are many, I'm not going to name them, but I'm sure you know what they are. Check the seller's history of sales on that website and any comments associated with them. I sold a couple of fragrances on a website called Mercari, and I had a great experience as a seller, and part of the sales process is for the buyer to leave a comment about the experience with the seller and the item bought. These comments serve as education and diligence for future buyers from that seller. And you should definitely consider reading those carefully and seeing if, out of 10 sales, 7 of them have negative comments, or there was some kind of problem, or there was a delay, or the product wasn't as described. Now, these are people making comments, and people are driven to make comments for various reasons. And sometimes those reasons can be they want to get something for nothing. So you have to take that into consideration as you read these, because there are sellers out there who get a raw deal by, only having made a few sales, and the few that they've made, they happen to have aligned with sellers looking to get something for nothing. So they're going to leave a negative comment in hopes of getting a refund somehow through the site or their credit card company or whatever. So take that into consideration. Obviously, the more sales transactions are recorded on the site, the more information you have available to you, and the more likely you are to get a clearer picture of what dealing with that seller would be like. So definitely make use of that data. Consider working with known sellers. Known sellers could be a YouTube content creator that perhaps has made it known that they've got a site, an online store, or somewhere that they use to sell fragrances they no longer want to keep. They'll very often tell you why they're selling them. Usually it's a declutter, something like that. They've gotten a lot of PR or complimentary fragrances from houses or other retailers, and they're simply looking to declutter, or they want to, be more minimalist with their fragrance collection. They can't possibly get through it all or wear it all, or maybe their tastes have changed. Whatever the reason, there is more likely to be information about that individual. They have something very real to lose, like their reputation online. If they were fraudsters, they probably wouldn't be successful in their content creation endeavors on YouTube or anywhere else if, they're doing declutters all the time and defrauding their audience or their buyers. So consider that. That might be an idea of a known seller. Another idea for a known seller is a store. So sometimes physical stores, brick and mortar, will also have an online presence, and they will sell through that online store as well. But of the brick and mortar store, it's legitimate. This is a real business. Kind of gives you a little bit more comfort that you're not dealing with a fraudster. If you don't know the seller, make an attempt to get to know the seller. So if you feel comfort, say with the number of transactions or any other kind of comfort with a seller, but you're not 100% sold, maybe you reach out, because some of these sites will allow you to communicate through comments back and forth with the seller. And I've done this myself. I haven't actually bought anything on the secondary market. I have sold on the secondary market, but I have asked in instances where I was curious about a fragrance, hey, why are you selling this? Where did you store the fragrance for the amount of time you had it? Where did you buy the fragrance? I might have misgivings if they bought the fragrance on the secondary market 5 years ago and now they're selling it again on the secondary market. That might, it's just that much more attenuated from the original retail source, which, might give me concern. Not necessarily. I'll also ask to see more pictures. A lot of times they're very happy to provide additional pictures. You just have to tell them what you want the pictures of. I had someone ask me about a fragrance I'm still selling. I'm selling on Mercari. They wanted to see the serial number on the back of the bottle. I hadn't taken a picture of that in my original picture posting, so I was happy to do that. and post it so that the person inquiring could see for herself. So don't be afraid to ask these questions. Ask about, if you can't see, some bottles are very dark or have opaque coloring to them. Ask for, some kind of indication somewhere visible on what the line is, the use line on or the dent on the bottle. Sometimes you'll see a seller take a picture of the bottle and it's opaque, but you'll see like a line drawn across the picture saying this is approximately where the dent in the bottle is. Other times I've seen them hold it up to the light, and if it's a translucent bottle, sometimes you can actually see where the dent is. That can be helpful too. So don't be afraid to inquire and ask for more. A legitimate seller will usually not have a problem with providing you that additional information. So that's getting to know your seller. So next, think about details in the description of the bottle. If the details are taken from a retailer site, that's okay. Sometimes it can be great, but what other details? What is the seller communicating from themselves and not from a website about the fragrance? And that should be where you hear about the amount having been used and any details around the storage or how they acquired it or why they're getting rid of it, that sort of thing. So once you gather this information from the seller and from the site, think about the quality of the information you have. So I mentioned a moment ago the descriptions. Are the descriptions something written by the seller, or did they come from a retailer website, and only a retailer website? That in and of itself, again, is not proof of a fraudulent deal, but it's an indicator, something you should consider in weighing all the evidence you gather. Also consider the photographs provided in the listing. I've seen, and I don't know how this doesn't get flagged by the website itself, I've seen the same bottle sold by, 5 different sellers in different parts of the country, completely different names, all with similar descriptions, if not identical descriptions. And the fragrance bottle will be sitting on the same dining room table, on the same mat, or with the exact same picture in the background, but the same bottle is being sold by 5 different people across the country. That to me is a red flag. Is it proof? No. I can't say with certainty, but I would not buy that fragrance, at least not without a lot more assurance that the individual selling was legitimate. And a lot of times too, with those kinds of photographs, the seller has no selling history. And I'm usually sympathetic to little to no selling history, and the reason for that is there was a time when I had no selling history, but I made it very, very clear that I was a real person, not a fraudster, and I put a whole lot of information that really distinguished my listing from others. There was no way anyone who wasn't trying to steal my selling identity had anything close to what I had. I suppose they could have done a copycat listing, but short of that, no. There was no doubt whatsoever. I was a real person looking to sell a real fragrance, as much as you could possibly glean from my listing. So check that out too. Are they stock pictures? Are there, so if you're looking up a fragrance and you see 10 listings and 5 of them are identical, but they're 5 different people from 5 different parts of the country, and the pictures are all the same, the description is all the same, be careful with that. Next, consider how you pay. There are ways to shield yourself. I won't get into the details on that, but you can research for yourself the sales dispute process on any website through which you buy a fragrance. You should definitely check that out in advance. What happens if the fragrance ordered is not what arrives? What happens if the fragrance ordered is completely different from what you were expecting to arrive? How would that work? Get all that information in advance. Be careful how you pay. I like to pay through third-party payment apps like a PayPal. That's just me. There might be some utility in using a credit card as opposed to a debit card, that sort of thing. Definitely research the way that you feel most comfortable paying. And then finally, do not overspend. At least do not uncomfortably overspend. That's probably a better way to put it. When dealing with niche fragrances and indie houses, you may have a harder time finding those on the secondary market. But I've had tremendous luck. I tend to find several listings, at least on the sites I review. And I only look at the mainstream sites, so I'm sure you know what they are. I've mentioned Mercari earlier. That is definitely one of them. I've been pleasantly surprised with the broad range of available options. But don't be terribly surprised if what you want is, very, very hard to find, very niche, and you can't find it on the secondary market. That's to be expected. But the fun is you just keep checking back, and it's surprising what you find. So it's kind of like buying anything on the secondary market, whether it's vintage handbags or going antiquing. Just a tremendous amount of fun what you can find. Now, you can also overspend on the secondary market, so let me say that too. I try to go in looking for a particular thing. Of course, you can browse, but if you let yourself browse too much, you run the risk of finding all these wonderful things that you never knew you wanted, and they're tremendously discounted, and they all seem to be perfectly legitimate listings. And then you're right back to square one because you're spending just as much on the secondary market buying 20 bottles as you would have in a 5-bottle haul from the retail market, and that kind of defeats the purpose. So be careful, be deliberate in your spending. Don't buy if you can't afford. I try to be deliberate in my spending. I only spend what I can afford. My fragrance purchases aren't nearly as enjoyable to me if I've overspent or I feel guilty. So I really try to make sure that it's, a completely positive experience, that I get great pricing whenever possible, and I don't have any regrets. So I always recommend thinking along those lines, whether you're buying retail or you're buying in a secondary marketplace. I hope this was helpful. I'd love your feedback in the comments below. If you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing. I don't have very many, and I'm really trying to engage with more folks in the fragrance space. So let me know if you like the content. If you have any other suggestions for content, let me know that too. I'm going to do at least one more video on this topic, kind of keeping spending in check. I probably won't do it right away. I'll do some more reviews in the meantime, but let me know what you think. I'd really appreciate the feedback. Thanks so much, and have a great rest of the day. Bye.